We're interviewing missionaries from the California, Nevada, Hawaii district, and this is Pastor Trinidad Castaneda. And Trinidad, I think they call you Pastor Trini, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in the Durango, Mexico. I grew up in the city of Chicago. And in 1995, we arrived in Oklahoma City, where I spent 19 plus years there before I arrived here in California.
Oh, you immigrated. You were immigrants. Your
Yes.
family came here. What year was that when they came?
1974 is when my parents were able to bring the entire family to the United States.
They'd been here before that?
Yes.
Working?
Working. My father and mother and my older brother arrived in Chicago.
And how old were you when you came?
I was 5 years old.
5 years old. What do you remember about that? What do you remember about Mexico? What do you remember about coming to the U.S.?
I remember it was an interesting trip. We come from a very small town where we lived while my father had enough money to bring us all over. And it's the town of El Salto, Durango.
El Salto, Durango. What does that mean in English? El Salto.
El Salto actually means the hop or the jump.
Oh.
El Salto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I don't know what that has to do with the name, but that's where I came from. And it's that was when I discovered the wonderful world of McDonald's and French fries and the magical rooms that we've come to know as elevators. And so it was quite a learning experience.
So it was a small town where
Yes.
you came from? A rural area?
Rural, yes.
Oh, okay. And your folks immigrated because?
As always, the financial aspect. My parents' desire to do better for us. There was also a little bit of just, crisis and the need for my father to relocate. And so he did.
What was that about? What was the crisis?
He was a businessman, and he owned some carnicerias, a small grocery store. And, business was not able to advance as he would have liked. So with the desire to find a better future for the children, he decided to move to the United States.
Did he go alone at first?
At first he did a couple runs where he went by himself. And it was just like your usual story. Come to the United States and work and make a little bit of money and go back and try to progress with the family. And after it became more apparent that he needed a better future for his family, then he and my mom and my brother came to the United States, and that's when they were able to raise enough funding to bring us over. And eventually we did get our immigration status adjusted. I was one of the luckier ones in that I began my entire school here in the United States from kindergarten on up. But it was quite a different adjustment for my other brothers who were older.
You still have family back in Mexico?
No.
Nobody?
There's distant family, I'm sure, but no. All of my brothers, my sisters, they're all here in the United States.
Who did you stay with when the rest of the family came and you stayed behind?
Family on my father's side.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And they took a little 5-year-old.
Yeah.
You were alone? Did you?
Well, actually, my grandmother was always a part of our household. And so, we stayed with family that were able to look out for the entire family, but I stayed with Grandma, and Grandma looked out after everybody that was there. My grandmother on my father's side. And of course, when we were able to travel to the United States, she came right along with us. And she was part of our household till the Lord called her to glory. Actually, we were a household of 12. There was 9 children, and then it was my mom, my dad, and my grandmother.
And you lived in an apartment?
Yes.
A rented apartment. How many bedrooms did you have at that point?
Well, I don't remember ever having a bigger apartment than a 3-bedroom apartment. Yeah, and God is so good to us. With time, my father was able to purchase his own house, and so we were able to be much more comfortable. His first house was a two-story building with a fixed basement, so we actually had plenty of room. Yeah.
What did he do? What did your dad do?
My father came here and he just worked as a laborer, a machinist. Yeah.
Saved his money?
Saved his money.
And bought a house?
Bought a house, yes. Was able to take care of all his family, and he was pretty much the sole provider. So they were wonderful with money in that sense. Was able to put all of us through school, and we all had everything that we needed. Yes.
And where did you go to church, or did you go to church? Did the family worship?
Yes, very young. We lived in the Wrigley Field area, and there was a small church in, I believe the streets are Addison and Halsted, Lakeview Lutheran Church, and through a pastor that was, and I didn't know what his function was, but we met Pastor Julio Loza, and later on he moved to St. Matthew Lutheran Church in the south side of Chicago. But as he served there, he reached out to the community, and that's how he met my mom and my dad, because we were part of that community. And that's where the ties began.
So it was a Latino community?
Not at all.
No?
It was an American community. Yes.
Anglo?
Yes.
Oh, okay. But Pastor Loza was there, and he was looking for people who spoke Spanish.
Right.
To begin a church?
Well, that's where we began worshiping, and they had Sunday service at 12:30, and that's where we would go and worship.
An Anglo church that
Yes.
opened its doors to Latino congregation. Yes. What was the name of the church? Do you remember?
Oh my! I remember the sign on the side of the van. Primera Iglesia Luterana. Yeah, something like that.
Primera.
I mean, this is going back
First.
quite a few years. But yeah, that became a very welcome sight for us as we saw it come down, because we knew we were going to go to church and good things happened there.
When did you think about becoming a pastor?
Well, that's when I was getting ready to be married, and at that point, God had just placed perfect vehicles for that roadway to be walked on. And I remember Douglas Grohl came to our congregation, and he made us aware of the Instituto Hispano de Teología. And as I received some information about that, at that point I was already engaged, and I brought in my wife into that conversation and said, I think this is where God is calling me, and I think this is where I need to go. And of course, knowing that we were already engaged, I wanted her to be active in the decision-making process, and her advice was, well, let's pray about it. And here we are. We'll celebrate 25 years of marriage in July, and it looks like it was a road that was meant for us to be on.
Okay, so you were bivocational in the beginning? You were working at another job and going to school, or how did that work?
Yes, in the sense that, as the Hispanic Institute works, you're able to continue on living and working where you are as they prepare you for ministry. And so, yes, I've worked a plethora of jobs. I've been everything from, tow truck driver to car mechanic to house remodeler. I worked as a warehouse supervisor. I did security for some time. I was a realtor for about a year, and I worked in aviation most recently for about 5 years, and so I've done quite a bit.
It's like St. Paul as a tent maker.
Yes, yes.
And all that time that you were working, you were involved in going to school and ministry?
Well, actually, up until the time when I arrived in Oklahoma City, when they brought me on, when I arrived to Oklahoma City, I was working as an ESL teacher within Roosevelt Junior High in Oklahoma City. And there was a flourishing mission there led by Reverend Angel Perez. And when I arrived there, he sought the funding to be able to bring me on a part-time basis to work with the youth. And as our relationship grew, I was able to be brought on a more consistent basis. So it was a transition from working, outside of the church to fully being immersed and working for the church. At that point, that's when I began our seminary level of studies at St. Louis Concordia. And I remained there at Cristo Rey on a full-time basis since July of 1996, I believe, or 97. And Pastor Angel Perez received and accepted a call to Puerto Rico, and at that time the district felt it good to give me, place me as a lay leader, commission me as a lay leader. And so at the same time that I was receiving my education through the seminary, I was receiving practical education with my congregation in Oklahoma City. And so we grew up together.
So you were considered a vicar at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Under supervision.
Right.
But this sounds very New Testament, where St. Paul would go around to different communities. He would find somebody. He would work through distance education, which we call the epistles today, keeping tabs on the congregation, but practical work on scene and then education as you went along. Was that difficult to do?
Oh, it sure wasn't easy. Since Nellie and I were married, God blessed us with our children immediately, and so when I began my seminary level studies, I already had 4 children, and so having to navigate with that family responsibilities and the work responsibilities and then the education responsibilities sure made it interesting.
Did you ever want to quit?
Oh, most definitely. If it wasn't by God's grace and the patience of the professors and the encouragement of the Holy Spirit, I don't think we'd be sitting here today.
It's a lot of work to do. Yeah. Do you wish that you'd had been able to go full-time to the seminary instead of doing that action reflection kind of model?
At times I wonder about that. Would it have afforded me better abilities to be more efficient or effective as I reach out in ministry? But as it sits right now, I'm pretty content with the way God has run the course of my life. I know that where I lack, He gives that which is lacking to me. And there hasn't been a situation where by His grace and whatever the situation is, the people involved have not been able to come out of it victorious.
It does seem to me that that there are pluses and minuses in both strategies. To take somebody out of their context and put them into a monocultural context and give them time to study has advantages.
Yes.
But there's adult learning is more, in my way of thinking, an action reflection model, so that while you're actually doing the ministry, you're getting what you need when you need it. Does that make sense to you?
It does, and maybe I'll say it in a little bit of a different manner. All of the education that is afforded is of value, but to be able to see what you're really going to need and how it goes into its uses and its practices and its blessings and the importance of one thing over another, I think there's real value in that. And at the same time, you can't help but say, boy, wouldn't we want to be in a perfect world where we can afford everybody the fullness of education in every single subject in every single matter. But I guess it's not possible.
No, no.
Yeah.
And they're, yeah, okay. So you were in Kansas City. How many years?
Oklahoma City.
In Oklahoma City.
Yes,
I'm sorry. How many
I
years?
was there we arrived in September of 1995, and we left in December of 2014, so it was almost 20 years.
20 years as assistant and as pastor.
Yes.
Not a long time.
Yes.
Mm.
It was, for example, to give you a summary of what transpired during that course. When we arrived there, Cristo Rey Lutheran Church was a mission church. And when in 2000, when I arrived there, we were a mission church, and we were worshiping in a borrowed site with one of our Anglo congregations. They had a little building that was not being used, and so that's where Cristo Rey found home. And as time progressed, and the outpouring of God's blessings, that mission took hold, and families began finding home. And in 2000, it was very clear that that little building would not suffice for the ministry there. And the Oklahoma district, recognizing the need for us to move, they were very gracious in, providing us the avenue by which we could move.
After 20 years, you moved to another ministry. Tell us about that.
Yes. We received a call from a congregation in Bakersfield, St. John's Lutheran, pastor for a satellite ministry in the city of Arvin, which is a small agricultural city south of Bakersfield.
So this was an Anglo congregation in Bakersfield.
Yes.
That saw the opportunity to start a Hispanic ministry.
Right. Well, the situation is a little bit different. As the situation existed, it was a congregation that had existed. It had a 100-year history in the city of Arvin, Union Congregational Church. And this congregation was dwindling down in numbers, and the community changed around them, and they were not able to change with it. So with the inability to reach out to the community, Hispanic community, and Arvin is over 94% Hispanic. Mm-hmm. They saw their numbers dwindling, and they knew that it was not a ministry that would survive for very long. So before it got to that point, they began doing some research and looking into a church that would be willing to take over. So that in June...
Take over the facility.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in June of 2014, they deeded over all their goods and properties, and it was now in the hands of St. John's in Bakersfield. Okay. And they were aware that this would be a Hispanic, or at least included Hispanic ministry, because of the numbers and the composure of the city.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so.
And did you do anything different to start this ministry than what had been done before? Did you use the same strategies as Oklahoma?
Very same strategies. The very first thing I did was begin in the community and get to know it. I remember even before we began worship service, I tried to establish a relationship with the people of the community. And right in the center of the city is a park that's called the Giorgio Park. Mm-hmm. And there is a youth center, a boxing club. And so I went to meet with the gentleman that led that boxing club and got to know a little bit of what he does and what the club does. And one of the things that came to my sight immediately was the amount of graffiti and the need for a little bit of elbow grease and tender loving care to the building. And so that's where we began. We set up a community work crew, and for about 5 weekends We hosted the first weekend, I believe it was manned by the youth of Arvin High School. They have a Bible club. So that weekend we had about 12 of their youth and, supervisors from our congregation come out there, and we began painting the building.
When you say our congregation, what?
St. John's Valley of Faith.
St. John's, in
Yeah.
Bakersfield. Okay.
No, St. John's in Arvin. St.
In
John's.
Arvin?
Yeah.
How many people were in your congregation at that point?
There was about maybe 30 at that point.
From the Anglo.
From the Anglo.
Oh,
Yeah.
mhm.
The Hispanic ministry was not there. It did
Wasn't
not
there.
exist.
Mhm.
So the composure of the membership of that congregation was about 30 people.
Mhm.
And so through those that were able, and it's an older congregation, not very many young able bodies to get on ladders and things like that. But we had enough. And so we began that, and we worked we did what we were able to do the first weekend with the youth from the Arvin High School. Then the second work crew consisted of members of St. John's Valley of Faith in Arvin, and people that we invited that we were getting to know come and help us out. And another weekend was manned by members of St. John's Bakersfield. And one of the other work weekends was just a mesh of everybody that could show up. I believe it was about the third work weekend when we saw a couple of people pulling up, and it was like 3 or 4. And I don't know who did this, but as they shared with me, is we saw a posting on Facebook that you would be here working, and so we're here to help. And I tell you, one of the reporters from the Arvin Tiller came by, and he was just floored at the difference that building made in the community. I mean, it went from looking pretty dilapidated to being a freshly painted, no graffiti building, and it was just looking pretty good. They did a beautiful job. And not only on that building, but we had enough people, the response was amazing, that we actually cleaned that park. There was not one piece of litter anywhere. We removed the graffiti from the picnic tables, and it was incredible. We did a wonderful job.
So the new mission came in and found something in the community that needed to be addressed.
Mhm.
You did that. You organized people to address that need, and people saw that you were concerned about
Yes.
the community.
Yes.
How long have you been to this new place now?
Oh, it will be 3 years in December this year. So
And how has it gone with developing the new mission?
we've gone from maybe 25 to 30 people, 20 to 30 people on a Sunday service, and pretty much that being what happened, to now the facility is being used almost every single day of the week. We have a clothing pantry which is open to the community, and there's the resource agencies from around Arvin refer people to us. So one day a week, but we take them by appointment, and they're able to come in and gather, articles of clothing or whatever other donated items are there that they need. They're able to take them home at no cost. We have an after-school program where right now we have about 22 enrolled students, and these are elementary age, maybe from first grade to sixth grade, is that correct? And that happens on Thursdays. Of course, we have Wednesday Bible studies. We have Friday. Friday we used to have just one study that was a catechetical type class for membership. And since then it's changed to now the Lutheran Hispanic Missionary Institute. We have a group of 7 students that meet via internet with Reverend Schlack. And they are midway through their first course. And I'm excited about that because we have 7 registered or 7 enrolled students who have taken their spiritual education so seriously that they've afforded one day out of the week to study. And part of this institute is a leadership aspect. And so I'm just chomping at the bits to see what is going to transpire from there. We have, yes.
So it's a strategy to help them grow spiritually,
Yes.
but some of them could become missionaries.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Very good.
On Tuesday, we continue to house the ladies group that has been there ever since we arrived. And even that's been a wonderful thing to see, because in the beginning it was American Anglo ladies that would come there and fellowship. And as I visit with them every Tuesday morning, and I check on them in the morning, and you know, the composure has changed quite dramatically. Now we have a few American Anglo ladies, and now they are surrounded by a great more number of Hispanic ladies that they are fellowshipping with. And so it's interesting to sit there and watch them. Some of them don't speak English, and of course our ladies don't speak Spanish, but they're still fellowshipping and they're getting along just fine.
So you went from 20 to 30 Anglo people worshiping to where are you now with worship attendance and ethnicity?
The biggest growth is in the Hispanic aspect of our ministry. I know, for example, on Easter Sunday we celebrated at 76.
Oh, wow.
And so it would,
in English or Hispanic?
that would be
Spanish.
Together blended. So you would say about maybe 20 people English speaking, and maybe the rest would be Hispanic.
So 40, 50 Hispanic, and it's only been 3 years.
Yes.
Not even. Wow, that's wonderful. One final question. What's your biggest learning experience? What would you advise a missionary starting out to do if they were going to plant a new mission? What would you say they should do?
You know, there are so many different ways of approaching ministry and missions, and I'm sure there's a plethora of how-to books. But one thing that I discovered through Oklahoma City, and it's the identical thing here in Arvin, California, is the power of the love and the truth of God's Word. You open that up and you share that and you remain faithful to it, and everything flows from there.
Thank you very much, Trini. It was great getting to know you and know you too, to have you both here with us today. Thank you.
You're welcome.